Hello, this is Lance Gordon, philosopher, scientist, educator. I'm here to present a book of mine called The Philosophy of the Ananke, which I wrote back in 1985 and have numerous updates since then, especially in the year 2000, the latest update being 2 years ago. This book deals with a very interesting topic that I was exposed to at age 20 in, of all things, an ancient history class, primarily the Greeks. It seems that there was a concept that there was a singular order to things in the universe that generated the design that we see. And now, the quest that I had for many, many years, from age 20 to 35, was to find this ultimate design, this ultimate singularity, as the Greeks would put it. They tried way back when, but did not really elevate it to a singular design. They divided up the universe from the micro to the macro, from physics at the time to chemistry and biology and human affairs and geology and astronomy, for example, and subdivided the universe in that manner, trying to figure out the orders of things, which came down to us with a lot of scientific knowledge as a consequence. But I was intrigued by this concept. It seemed to be right in between science and religion, the singular order. It was not dealing with intelligent design. I didn't even know the word intelligent design back then, but it is, in a way of speaking, summarizing this design into a singular process, as it turns out, which is very unusual, since I was trained, and I'm sure you were trained, that these things are separate, that physics is entirely different than psychology, entirely different than sociology, entirely different than botany. But it isn't. There is a commonality that I have seen that the Greeks felt, that I have documented. Within that commonality, which I'll be exposing to you in this book of mine, by reading it primarily and commenting from time to time as my spirit guides me, this is a very intriguing concept, since, as I said before, you wouldn't expect it to be a singular process. You would think that the universe is composed of multiple processes that we have studied, but it isn't, and that makes it very suspicious. So the first part of the book will deal with elevating you slowly into this singular process called the Ananke. Thereafter, we try to justify it through evidence of Ananke and man, and Ananke and science, and then finally this generality, this inductive generality, is used to speculate, as we all would want to answer the age-old questions dealing with the universe, which I'll get into in a little while. That's in chapter 5. To understand Ananke and speculation, dealing with this metaphysical speculation. And lastly, chapter 6 ends up being Ananke and world affairs, as I saw it back in 1985. Thereafter, there are updates to the book that have occurred since then, such as 2 years ago, was dealing with Neo-Darwinists and the Ananke. Nonetheless, I'll do this in about 30-minute segments, part 1 through part I don't know, because I haven't really done all of it. This is the first one of many parts. So let us begin. The front of the Ananke book looks like this, if I want to show you it over here. It just says The Philosophy of the Ananke by Lance Gordon, with a symbol that I invented over the years that reflects the singular order of things. Give you a little bit to look at it. Okay, so let me begin by opening the book and going through it slowly. I first have an executive summary, which I want to read to you. And it says, Ananke is the ultimate order in all things. It is an ancient Greek concept 3,000 years old. that is still relevant to the searching individual today. If you are not satisfied with the blind belief systems of our inherited religions, nor the incompleteness of the sciences, you should read this book, or in this case, listen to the book. Contained within is evidence that guides us into an educated belief in something greater. This book delivers a way to utilize the information of the ancient concept in a constructive, deductive manner. Applications of the Ananke range from the scientific to the humanistic to the metaphysical. The knowledge of this Ananke can guide us to the understanding of any phenomena, from the macro, the astronomical, to the human, the pursuit of happiness, to the micro, atomic physics. By mapping the order's components onto any situation and interpreting the results, we can approach peace, balance, and happiness for all upon its proper application. Of course, key word is proper application, and key word is if you understand the concepts. If you are eager to get to see what this book is and get ahead of the audio visual that I'm doing right now, then you can email me at ANANKE, the numeric 1, at yahoo.com, and request a free book, and I'll be glad to shoot it to you as a PDF. It won't have the MP3s associated with it because it's too much to upload, but the book itself is about 180 pages long, I would say, something like that at this point in time. So if you're interested, again, to receive the book without waiting for all of my reading it in on YouTube, then it is A as in Alpha, N as in Nancy, A as in Alpha, N as in Nancy, K as in Kevin, E as in Every, 1 at yahoo.com. And my name is Lance Gordon. Just request a free copy and I'll be glad to shoot it to you, assuming there aren't that many. Okay, so that was the executive summary. The table of contents, I believe, is next, but I'm not going to read it to you. You will basically do that if you get the book. We will just be covering it from the beginning to the end. And let me get to it. Sorry about that. All right, so the first part is an introduction. This book was created in order to help the searching, questioning, thinking individual. Men and women of all ages that have ever pondered the question why should delve into the concepts expressed within. The questions that are addressed are given positive, definite answers. Some of the answers are based on abundant evidence, while others are based on speculative logic. In either case, the reader is not left in a state of confusion, but is instead given clarity and direction. The answers that are revealed are complete and describe a cosmos that may exist in reality. I invite you, my audience, to read about the ancient, in this case, listen, about the ancient Greek concept called Ananke. It should be mentioned that this concept of 3,000 years ago was never elevated to an integrated philosophy. That's my job right now in my book. Nonetheless, the theory of Ananke was utilized by the ancient Greeks. The philosophic schools of thought were created by virtue of it. The Ionians and Eleatics, the early scientists, used its principles in order to describe more fully the world in which they lived. Plato and Aristotle assumed its existence and created systems of logic and spiritual thought. The concept of Ananke guided man's reason, but did not give the specific details of the specific questions that were posed. It was up to the great philosophers to analyze and describe the expressions of this Ananke as they appeared on earth, as well as the heavens above. From my earliest exposure to this concept, I was intrigued. Could I use its principles to describe a new philosophy? Could I find a way of thought that synthesized religion with science? Could there be a way to view the cosmos with the least amount of faith and the most amount of evidence? Could this system of thought deliver the quote-unquote answers and not leave us dry or wanting? And this was back in 1985 that I wrote it, after 15 years, that meant from age 20 to age 35 at the time, of research, experimentation, and contemplation, I found a tentative solution. Within this book, the ideas of a new innovative cosmology are organized into a cohesive whole. I call this system of thought the philosophy of the Ananke. The problem. At an early age, I began to question the religion which I inherited. Being scientific in nature and extremely logical, I naturally questioned the beliefs based on the scientific facts that were available. For example, if all the plants and creatures always existed, then where were the dinosaurs today? Why do layered rocks reveal extinct creatures when all was supposedly created by God, spontaneously? Why did science claim the earth was billions of years old, when the Bible claimed a mere 6,000? If the Bible was not accurate, then how could I trust the remaining claims on faith alone? If my inherited religion could not be obeyed, then how should I live my life? Should I react by my impulses and short-term preferences? Should I pursue the almighty dollar? Should I be satisfied with food, shelter, clothing, and at the end of it all, death? What is death? Do we die forever? What is the purpose of life? Is there a purpose to life? I am aware that I exist, but do I have a soul? Does a soul exist? What is a soul and what are its properties? If a soul exists, then is there a God? Where is this God? What is this God? Why does it exist, if it exists? How can we communicate to it? Does God have a purpose? Why did God create this world? Why did God create man? What possible purpose could there be to the misery on earth? If there is a purpose, then how do we get there? What is the goal in life? What is the proper way to behave in order to achieve this goal? Why do we exist at all? The methodology employed in this book. The above questions reflect some of the problems that will be addressed in the coming pages of the book. The answers will be revealed in a logical manner. It is advised to read this book from the beginning to the end, or in your case, listening to it from the beginning to the end. Skipping chapters or reading rapidly will only confuse the average and even above average individual. On that point, I've had many friends and acquaintances who have read the book, and they skipped around thinking it's like a magazine. They couldn't understand some things because they didn't have the previous knowledge that I gave in order to understand it fully. So I really don't advise skipping around. It's very difficult. I've tried to explain things to individuals by skipping around myself. It's very difficult. You don't have the background. It's like skipping to integral calculus without doing elementary algebra first. You can't do it. So it's the same way in this book of mine. You should go from the beginning to the end. But if you're really excited to see the end first, fine, you can do it. Some of the appendices. I should mention the first 6 chapters have not been touched since 1985. I decided not to go over them, but to go ahead and add to them in an appendix, which was modeled after the He Ching, a Chinese philosophy book that had the yin-yang symbol in it, which was not what's behind my back. That's the yin-yang symbol, but it's not the one that the Ananke symbol is. You'll notice there is a difference, and that was created within the I Ching. But I'm going off on a tangent here. The next part of the methodology. After reviewing the book a first time, it will be necessary for you to cover the material once more. A lot of facts and thoughts are delivered in a relatively small amount of space. Savor and enjoy the thoughts. Reflect upon each concept as it becomes crystallized in your mind. Write notes if necessary and questions that remain unanswered. Sometimes the answers will emerge in later chapters. In order to reveal the knowledge in a logical manner, I employed the following scheme. Chapter 1. We begin the logic with a search for the relationship of the speculated God. Some of the ancient religions and philosophies are covered in a very brief manner. The Babylonian religion, Egyptian Memphitic theology, and Hinduism are among those that will be discussed. By the end of the review, the Greek concept of Ananke will be exposed. It'll become obvious that an evolution of religious/philosophic thought delivered this strange yet appealing belief. For more details of the other religions, please review other books on the subject matter. I merely give you a brief in 20 pages or so, 11 religions from around the world, so you get some insight in a condensed manner. But it's up to you, if you were interested in that, to get another book of sorts. Chapter 2. Before the Ananke can be judged by the reader, it will be necessary to convey the logic of pursuing the truth in a scientific manner. Towards this end, theorizing, postulating, and hypothesis testing will be discussed. The theory of the Ananke will be exposed in this chapter, as well as the necessary postulates that were assumed. Instruction on creating Ananke-type hypotheses will be necessary, and the 4 primary hypotheses will be revealed. These generalities are tested in Chapter 3 and 4 by showing evidence of their manifestation. The 4 primary hypotheses will be found to describe a fundamental pattern, rhythm, or cycle in the universe. This pattern will be called a formula, in the sense that all events are mere substitutions into this 4-variable equation in the sky, so to speak. It'll be hypothesized that all things and events are guided by this cycle. The testing of this hypothesis will also occur in chapters 3 and 4. Lastly, it'll be claimed that the 4-fold formula seems to have a highest singular pattern that it obeys. The fundamental cycle in our universe will be found to have purpose. The highest pattern of the Ananke will be complete. A hierarchy of patterns will be found to exist. Mysteriously, these patterns will reveal a direction of flow. It'll become apparent that we can go with the flow of this Ananke or against it. The ramifications to this theory will be investigated, and its usage will be discussed. By the way, years later, after I wrote the book, probably about 6 years later, in 1990-91, I did discover there was one and only one English writing person who saw the same phenomenon, and that was Herbert Spencer, which I go into in appendix as an update. It was quite amazing. He did see this Ananke and wrote a 10-volume set, Synthetic Philosophy. The first book, however, was the principles that he would use to figure out things like ethics and the sciences, and you name it, he did it within this 10-volume set. The first book was called, quite appropriately, First Principles, and he didn't give it a name, but it was no doubt, after reading it, the Ananke in disguise. He unfortunately does not speculate with it. He does create the Ananke singularity, as I did, but he doesn't use it from a speculative point of view to figure out the major questions of, could there be a mind behind the order that we see? Where do we go when we die, if we go anywhere, and so on and so forth. He claims it's unknowable, and it is unknowable to the extent that it is has less evidence than the Ananke itself, or in his case, First Principles. Nonetheless, that's what he did. It's unfortunate. He's a brilliant guy. He was a contemporary of Darwin. In fact, he was the one who coined the expression survival of the fittest. Again, his name is Herbert Spencer, and his book was First Principles, the first of a 10-volume set called his Synthetic Philosophy. If you ever want to try to find it, it's not easy to find. I do include it on my book. In fact, if you want the whole book itself, I can email it to you as well. All right. Anyway, this is part one, of course, of the explaining this Ananke to you, and there'll be many, many more parts. I don't know how many. It could be 10, it could be 20 to get through the whole book. If you want to get ahead, then you can go ahead and email me, and I'll be glad to shoot you a copy of the book, and you can read it at your leisure. And question me through the same site, ananke1@yahoo.com. Okay, to continue, and I'm only going to do 10 minutes more. I only want a 30-minute module. Chapter 3, I might even just stop after this intro to see how to upload to YouTube and see if there's any response. Anyway, Chapter 3. In this chapter, we will discuss the formula of the Ananke as it applies to man in a personal sense. We will find that the emotions and certain ways of behavior are mere reflections of this order. Self-interest, stress, boredom, evil, good, justice, and negativity are but a few of the manifestations that will be analyzed. By the end of this chapter, the reader should be somewhat convinced that the apparent confusion of our emotions and behaviors are in reality mere expressions of this order. It will become apparent that our behavior is being guided by this quote-unquote thing. Chapter 4. Having convinced the reader, hopefully convinced you, of the Ananke's relationship to man, we will go on to reveal its relationship to scientific law. Physics, chemistry, geology, biology, and mathematics will be discussed in a scientific, philosophic manner. This chapter ends with the scientific Ananke version of the origin of our universe. Chapter 5. At this point in the book, the reader should be convinced that the four patterns of Ananke do exist. They describe a fundamental cycle in this universe that seems to have a goal in its highest form. Ananke, this order of things, if you want to call it that, seems to guide and not dictate events. Particles and people are free to go with the order or against it. In the case of particles, going against the flow delivers opposing, cohesive forces. In the case of people, going against the flow delivers mental and/or physical pain in the long run. On the other hand, particles going with the flow expend the least amount of energy. It is the path of least resistance. For people, going with the flow delivers the least amount of pain and the highest state of enduring happiness. Using the conclusions that are reached in chapters 1 through 4, along with logical analysis, we will attempt to speculate on the questions of spirit, soul, God, purpose, and afterlife. Although this chapter will be based on very little evidence and consequently less valid than the previous chapters, it will be necessary to discuss these issues in order to make this concept a viable and integrated comprehension. Chapter 6, the last chapter officially of the book without the appendices. It was felt that by the author that no cosmological theory could be completed without addressing the philosophy in the light of world affairs. A philosophic way of thought should be capable of explaining the misery that we see in the world at large. Towards this end, the reality of starvation, disease, big business, and the concept of world peace will be discussed. Lastly, it will be suggested that a place should be formed where functional, practical philosophy can evolve. Ananke should be analyzed by various individuals of differing backgrounds. Their conclusions should be published and disseminated to the public at large. Hopefully, this will stimulate positive change. Ananke updates 1985 and beyond. Since the philosophy of the Ananke is meant to be an evolving document, I planned for an update section, which would contain revisions, clarifications, or amplifications to the original thought. All of the inclusions relate to one of the 6 chapters in the original book. For example, a comparative analysis with the British philosopher-scientist Herbert Spencer is included for your pleasure and relates to chapters in Chapter 1. A special update on Ananke and the Pursuit of Happiness is presented as well towards the end of the book. This relates to Chapter 2. Other updates will be written as my spirit and mind dictate. In conclusion, the philosophy of the Ananke is not finalized in the absolute sense. All views that are expressed are at most well-tested hypotheses. New evidence and factual data may contradict some of the speculation contained within at some future point in time. At that time, the concepts should be revised, modified, or destroyed. The factual world must be explained by a proper philosophy. Contradictions necessarily point to faults in the logic. Facts and scientific data are good and should not be feared. They help us approach the truth. As a final note, allow me to say that the usage of words like man or he are simply conventions that are used to reflect in actuality the concepts of man and woman, he and she. I regret if I offend some of my readers by utilizing this technique. I hope that this usage does not take away from the intriguing concepts that are expressed within. May this book guide you as it has guided me. May it deliver you to higher states of happiness as it has done for me. May it give you purpose and direction, and most of all, may it give you peace. Now sit back, relax, and let your mind go into the world of philosophic thought and speculation. Leave your cares behind, forget your troubles, enjoy. Again, this is part one of a many-part series to go through this book, and we're only through page 4, as it turns out. And once again, you can get the whole book for free, ANANKE1 at yahoo.com, Lance Gordon. Request a copy of The Philosophy of the Ananke, and I'll shoot it off to you as soon as possible. You can also, at that same email, if you have any questions dealing with the book, ask me questions. I may put it on future YouTubes as well. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a very peaceful day. Bye-bye.